Here though I walk through the valley of death.
The Dead Evangelist in choir robe. The setting was one of those rare, crisp mornings in the small town, where the air carried with it a sense of anticipation. The church service had begun, the choir was in full voice, and the congregation settled into their pews, eager for a morning of spiritual nourishment. In the midst of this, there was a man, the faithful Brother Clifford, sitting in his usual spot near the front, his face etched with the lines of dedication. He had been coming to this church for years, attending faithfully, never missing a service. But what set Brother Clifford apart wasn't just his attendance, it was his work on the fringes, outside the four walls of the church. 4 years, come rain or shine, Brother Clifford stood at the bus station, handing out gospel tracts to commuters. The weather never discouraged him, nor did the indifference of the passers-by. His faith was unwavering, and he believed that each tract handed out was a seed sown into someone's soul. He had never expected applause or recognition. His mission was clear: spread the gospel. But this particular Sunday, as the choir finished their song and the congregation rose to their feet in a standing ovation, Brother Clifford felt something stir within him, a strange, unfamiliar emptiness. The warm claps, the cheers, it was all for them, the choir. The ones who stood on the stage, who were in the spotlight, whose voices echoed through the walls. There was nothing wrong with it. But as he looked around, he couldn't help but wonder when would his work be acknowledged. 4 years, he had given his all to an invisible mission, one that seemed to go unnoticed by the church. His tireless work at the bus station, reaching out to the weary travelers, never once had brought any recognition. Not from the congregation, not from the pastor, and certainly not from those who received the tracts. He felt like a silent soldier, unseen and unappreciated. And so, Brother Clifford made a decision that would change the course of his life forever. If his efforts in evangelism went unnoticed, then perhaps he should pursue something that would draw attention. He joined the choir. It was a bold move, driven by the desire for recognition. The choir welcomed him with open arms, and before long, Brother Clifford found himself standing on stage, singing alongside them. The applause came quickly, a standing ovation after every performance. It was everything he had longed for: recognition, praise, admiration. And yet, even as the choir's praises echoed through the church, a nagging feeling tugged at Brother Clifford's heart. He thought he had found his place. He was being celebrated. But was this truly fulfilling his calling? Was this where God had intended him to be? One fateful Sunday, the service reached its zenith when Brother Clifford performed a solo. Psalm 23 filled the sanctuary with a haunting beauty as his voice soared, rich with emotion. The congregation stood, clapping and cheering. Brother Clifford felt the weight of their applause like a crown on his head. This was it. He had made the right choice. But then something unexpected happened. An old man, one who had not been there before, rose from the back of the sanctuary. His presence was unusual, like a shadow that had suddenly materialized in the light. With a trembling voice, he asked if he could sing the same song. The pastor, ever the courteous leader, allowed the stranger to perform, though the tension in the room was palpable. The old man began to sing, and it was as if the very heavens opened. His voice wasn't as polished as Brother Clifford's, nor was it as loud, but it carried a weight that none could ignore. The entire church, from the pastoral team to the last pew, fell to their knees in awe. Tears streamed down faces. Some prayed, others wept in repentance. The atmosphere was charged with a deep, spiritual energy that had not been present just moments before. The standing ovation for Brother Clifford evaporated into the air. And what followed was not a sermon but an altar call, a wave of sinners coming forward to accept Christ, backsliders returning to the fold, and the entire congregation rededicating their lives. In the space of a few minutes, the entire service had transformed. What had begun as a simple praise of music became a holy encounter with the divine. Brother Clifford, now silent, stood at the edge of the stage, a deep hole opening up in his heart. He realized, with overwhelming clarity, the stark difference between performance for the approval of men and true worship that touched heaven. The applause of the crowd, once a source of pride, now felt hollow. He had sought the adoration of men, But what he had witnessed today was something entirely different, something that came from a heart aligned with God. As the service concluded, Brother Clifford walked out of the church with a heavy heart. His choir robe still clung to him, but it felt foreign now, as if it no longer belonged to him. His mind raced, and a deep conviction settled over him. He didn't need the applause. He didn't need the recognition. He had been called to a higher purpose, one that didn't involve pleasing others. Without thinking, he walked straight to the bus station, as though his feet knew the way before his mind did. There, standing in his usual spot, was a man, a stranger. The man, not looking up, handed Brother Clifford a gospel tract. It read, "I will be a faithful soldier to the Lord, I will die at my post." And at the end, the tract asked a question, "Are you a faithful witness of the word?" Brother Clifford took the tract and, with tears welling in his eyes, asked the man about his own journey. The stranger's voice was calm but firm as he spoke of a man, the dead man, who used to stand in that very spot, distributing tracts day in and day out. The stranger had been the recipient of one of the tracts, which had forever changed his life. But now, the man who had faithfully stood at the bus station had vanished, and the stranger felt it was his duty to take up the mantle. "The dead man," the stranger said, with emphasis, "the dead man, the dead man. He's gone now, but I'm here because he was faithful. He didn't stop because no one applauded him. He didn't care about recognition. He was a soldier, and he stayed at his post." And in that moment, Brother Clifford was crushed. He dropped to his knees in repentance. The very thing he had been seeking, the recognition of men, was the very thing that had led him astray. He had abandoned the work God had given him for something fleeting, something temporal. The dead evangelist, a man who had never been celebrated, had remained faithful to his calling. His soul-winning efforts had been a true sacrifice, offered up to God in humble service. As tears streamed down Brother Clifford's face, he prayed, "God, forgive me. I have been blinded by the applause of men. I abandoned my post, and for that, I am sorry." The story of Brother Clifford serves as a timeless reminder to all of us who seek to serve God. Are we seeking the approval of men, or are we truly living for the approval of heaven? The church is not a place for entertainment, it is a place for true worship, for ministering to God's people with a humble heart. As you read this, ask yourself, am I like Brother Clifford in his choir robe, seeking the applause of men? Or am I faithfully standing at my post, doing the work that God has called me to, regardless of whether or not anyone notices? God has a purpose for each of us, and that purpose is far greater than the fleeting recognition of this world.
So follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell